Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter and welcome to my channel. And today I'm very excited to be showing you how I painted Zeratul from the new upcoming game StarCraft, a tabletop miniature game by Archon Studios. And what I love about these miniatures is that they are very detailed, they're quite large, and it's an entirely new game and it's going to be amazing. I have seen the videos that Archon Studio has published so far, and I'm very excited about the models. I have been a big fan since the StarCraft game initially came out. I think it's about 25 years ago. I think this is the 25th anniversary, and that's the reason for the launch of this game. The Zeratul miniature was originally issued as a promotional character several weeks ago, and I was kind of afraid to start painting it because the most beautiful result you can get with this miniature is by using an airbrush. I'm not really comfortable using an airbrush yet. I've been practicing over the past year and I'm getting more confident in doing so I'm going to show you my process. Of course, the entire miniature can be painted without the airbrush as well, but this just gives you a beautiful result. Now with this promotional character there was also an invisible, a cloaked version of Zeratul as well, and I'm going to show you how I made the base, and that's what I'm going to start the video with. If you're not really interested in making a base for this mini, just skip to the part where I get to paint Zeratul himself. And I hope this video is of any help to you guys, and please share with me your results, your comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in these kinds of videos, then please consider checking out my Patreon page as well, as I'll be painting a lot more different games there that will never hit the YouTube channel and will be exclusively to Patreon. So please check it out, please leave a comment below, and let's get to painting now. So here's the model we're talking about. It has this beautiful base with the Zerg body, and we have the cloaked version here. Now there's only one base with this model, so you either have to choose where to put your model on or make one yourself, as I'm going to show you here. So I just took a similar base, a 35mm base, and I'm just tearing off some pieces of cork that I have here to make a rock base for the second model. I also tried maybe magnetizing the miniature, but since that there is a lot of weight dangling on the top of the body, I couldn't find a way to make it sturdy enough. So what I'm doing here is kind of just gluing parts of cork to the plastic base, and we're just gonna make up a rock here. So just by some pieces you have lying around, and because there is a height difference in the two legs, I intend to create one larger, one higher part and a lower part, so that he can more or less lean on both legs, as you can see here, and still be straight. Now the difficulty will be positioning the model and making sure that it is kind of aligned the same as the original painted model that we're going to do later in this video. So here I'm adding some modeling sand to the base, but still the cork looks kind of straight layered, so I'm gonna fix that later on. So first I'm gonna let that sand dry. Just dip it in there if you want, sprinkle some around. Make sure that the edges are clean. I'm just using my finger to do so. Alright, now once that is dry and clean, you have something like this. And you can see a higher part of the rock on one side of the base and a lower part on the other half. Now I'm gonna make that rock even smoother because I don't like the flat areas, so I'm gonna fix that with some putty by Vallejo. And with this you can kind of make, I mainly use it to fix the gaps in molds, for example, on miniatures, but it's also perfect for use like this, to just fill up those holes and make the surface even smoother and more natural looking by adding some diagonal corners or pieces of rock in this case. It kind of fills up those holes and flat areas and just gives it a bit more character. So once this is dry, I spray painted it all black, and I'm giving it a base color of Mechanicus Standard Gray. Just slapping that on with a large brush. Don't be too precise, leave some black shining through as it's going to create a natural shade. The second step, once this is dry, is take a large dry brush and use some gray sear to create some edges to the rock. And you instantly have a beautiful piece of natural looking rock with some sharp edges here and there. Now we're on an alien planet, so I'm going to shade it a little bit with some Quelia green shade on one side, which is going to be the shady side of the miniature. And it just gives a little bit of extra touch to an otherwise quite boring rocky base. Now we have to position the cloaked miniature on the base, and for that I'm using this drill and kind of try to drill a hole in the leg, in the upper leg for this miniature, because it's standing on the highest part and I can add a pin in there for stability. So when you do stuff like this, make sure that your drill is small enough and not destroying the model, and also it creates a hole in the shape of the model. So when I'm drilling, you should follow the line of the leg, otherwise it comes out in a place you do not want it to come out. The next step, I'm just using a standard paper clip, a larger one in this case, and fitted it into the leg, and that worked perfectly. So now it's time to glue it all together and cut it into a smaller piece to add into the rock. So I'm just using some cutting tools here. I've got a smaller piece of metal, and now it's time to glue it all together. And for that I'm just using some super glue. I'm a big fan of the Army Painter super glue. This is not a sponsored video by any ways, but it's just the stuff I use. So once that is in place, it's time to see where the miniature should be exactly. And I want this large pin to be in the rock, so it should be a bit shorter, otherwise it's going to stick out. And it should just have some stability and not perforate my entire base. So it's going to be something like this. Now the difficulty is that it's going to be in diagonally, so we have to kind of guess where it should enter before pushing it in. So this is just a little bit of trial and error, and when I found it, I used my drill to make the hole a little bit smoother in a diagonal way. Again, making sure that it's not coming out of the base at some point. Once this is done, I have a smooth entry for the pin, and I can glue the mini to my self-created base. There's maybe some tiny tidying up on the paint job because of the tiny hole that we just created, but that's easily fixed. And that makes for a beautiful base for our cloaked version. Now I decided to give it a little bit of extra shading here and there by using some Drakenhof Nightshade on one side, which in my opinion should be the shaded side on this cloaked mini. And the other side we're going to give some extra color as well, just to add a bit more drama, because the mini itself is transparent. So I'm using some Tesseract Glow on the other side, just to have two different colors, and since we have painted on cork, this kind of blends with the paint that we did. It's going to blend up like it's quite bright now, but it's going to be less when it dries. So you get a very nice result. As you can see here, the finalized miniature on my improvised base, and that works perfectly. And now it's time to get painting on the base of the other model, so to say. So we've got the Zerg body lying here, or at least a part of it, and I base coated it in black and spray coated it with a Zeratul highlight with a bright gray sear in my case. So we have some bright colors on one side and a bit more of a shady side on the right side, as you can see here. And now it's time to add the first paint. Mechanica standard gray for all of the rocks that the body is lying on. There's some nice pointy stone and rocks here and there, and the body is just crashed in between, and Zeratul goes on top. As a base color for the Zerg body, I'm using dried bark. Just went all around the body except for the talons and the teeth. I left them as they were. But you can use the same base coat if you want. We're going to go over it again anyway, so... Okay, with this done, I'm dry brushing all the rock with some gray cere to add some edginess here and there. Focus mainly on the top areas, less on the bottom. I'm kind of stippling on some rock effect here and there. Don't worry too much about hitting the Zerg body because we're going to add some layers to that anyway, or otherwise do the dried bark afterwards maybe. Next step is to add some color to the base, and for that I'm imagining where the light source would be, then though it would come from his sword or his weapon or whatever we're gonna call it. So the line of light should be in the same direction, so on this rock here. That would be the brightest, and there would be some fall off on the rocks surrounding it. Don't overdo it, don't make the rock green, just add a green glow. So spread your paint when you think it's too much, just dry up your brush and take some off. On the other side, I decided to add some different color with Coelia green shade. It's nice to add some dramatic effect to the rocks, otherwise they're just plain gray and that would be a bit boring. Now with some null oil, I'm focusing mainly on the bottom part of the rock and a tiny bit of shade on the higher rocks, but focus mainly on the inside, so to say, of the base, as that would be the darkest. It adds some nice details, really brings out those cracks and tears. And I'm doing the same on the body of the Zerg with Airbrush Earthshade, so just slap that on as you go. And make sure there is a nice difference in browns with all those deeper areas. And next I'm gonna mix some Screamer Pink in Rhinox Hide. And what I'm doing here is bring some of that nice pink tone that you see in the original Zerg. I'm focusing on the lower areas of the body, so in between the scales on his back, some fleshy areas on the side, and on the forehead. Once this is done, I'm taking pure Screamer Pink and I'm stippling on some details on the front of the head. The rest of the body I'm gonna give the same highlight, but not stippling, just kind of adding some color here and there, but this adds to a nice detail. Now once you're done, you should have something like this. You can instantly see that pink really working out with the browns. Now it's time to focus on those browns. And for that I'm mixing some Scrag Brown into the dried bark we used before for my first highlight layer. I'm focusing mainly on the larger surfaces, kind of build them up and cover about 70% of the still visible brown. Leave the lower parts nice and dark, I focus mainly on those high areas, the areas that would catch the most light. Next up is pure scrag brown. And again, I'm applying it as a highlight layer, focusing on the top areas, decreasing the area that we paint, so focus mainly on those edges, the top areas of the area we painted before, and cover about, let's say, 50% of the 70% we did before. This is like math, isn't it? I'm holding my brush sideways like this, so to easily paint the tips on the back and the sides, and it's not a big deal if you kind of hit that pink because it blends together very nicely. I'm repeating the process with Deathclaw Brown, but decreasing the area that I paint again. So now it's a pure extreme highlight, so focus only on the corners of this body, and you get a nice transition in browns. Next up, with some Baneblade Brown, I'm painting the talons, the teeth, every pointy edge that he has. There is some on the front and back. We get a nice bony color on that. Also the teeth in the mouth here. And of course we're going to be highlighting that as well with Screaming Skull. Cover about 70% of what you painted before, so you get a nice transition from dark to bright. Now you might see that I missed one talon on the side of the body. I'm fixing that later on, but I'm using the exact same color scheme, of course. Finally, I'm giving an extreme highlight of Pallet Witch flesh, just focusing on the very tips of the claws and teeth to give it some sharpiness. Now once this is done, it's time to fix the eyes, and for that I'm using Evil Sun Scarlet to add a nice reddish evil glow to the eye. It's a very, very tiny spot and it's not really visible, but I think we should always add all the details you possibly can, right? And that concludes the base. Now it's time to paint the miniature Zeratul himself. And as you can see here, there is a transparent part that I taped off because I'm gonna spray paint it black. You can see here that the part is fully transparent. With this model it's only the sword, and the cloaked version of course is entirely transparent. I'm just using regular tape, but you can do it any way you seem fit. Maybe you have some putty lying around or whatever, but this is an easy way. And you can see here that the sword is still nice and transparent. Now the base skin I'm painting with Night Lord's blue, and as you can see I'm still holding the model because I didn't want the blue to touch the Zerg body we painted before on the base. So I'm first going to finish up on the skin tones and afterwards glue the miniature to the base and continue with the rest. Now there's a lot of skin showing, so please check out your box art or this video of course to see where that blue should go. And then it's time to highlight the blues. For that I'm using a Latok blue, and we're going to do more or less the same process as we did on the Zerg body. So cover about 80%, 70-80% of the body, leave some nice shady areas as they are. And especially on the head, which has a ton of details, it's actually the easiest way to do it like this. Hold your brush sideways and kind of dry brush it on. So you don't miss out on the details. You still have the depth on all those tiny wrinkles in there. For the next highlight I'm adding Fenrisian Grey to the Latok blue and repeating the process and decreasing the area. At this point I'm painting everything, so also the hand beneath the light weapon, the sword, or so what should we call it? Afterwards it's going to get, of course, a nice glow, but at this point I'm using the original skin color to get a nice blend of colors later on when that light has worked into it. Now I'm also adding some details to the head here, as that is the most prominent body part that we're going to see. And as a final step, I'm using a large dry brush and mixing some palette witch flesh into the Fenrisian grey to make an extreme highlight. So it's just the knuckles of the fingers, the very edges of the head, the toes, etc. Now with that done, it's time to glue it to the base, since we're not going to mess up the base anymore. So I'm just taking my super glue again and putting it together. And now it's time for the fun part, the airbrushing. As I said before, I'm quite uncertain when airbrushing. I'm not really used to it. What I did here is use Caliban green as a base color, and I taped off all the parts that I did not want to be painted. Be very careful, of course, around the base, but my airbrush is quite precise, so I can really maneuver it just the way I want it. With this base color, I'm adding some dark green to start from, and I'm brightening it up with mood green. And this mood green is going to help me emphasize the glow of the weapon. Now, of course, the reflection of the weapon is going to be the brightest exactly where the weapon is. So I'm kind of spraying in that area, focusing on the area exactly behind the sword. Next, I'm using Phoenician purple to paint the rest of the cloak, as that is nice and purple, and kind of blend those two colors together. And for that part, the airbrush is ideal. Now, when blending those colors together, keep in mind that where the brightest part, the light source, is coming from, so the weapon. So that means that when you are blending colors together, it can only be done from an angle that is natural. So when, for example, painting the lower part, make sure that the green is covering the purple and not the other way around. The reason I did the green before is that it's very hard to paint a light color over a dark color. So you have to kind of figure out where to start and stop. Now, the inside of the cloak is also purple, and I painted that in the exact same color. And you can have some brighter parts and darker parts if you want. Now, the easy part, of course, is the cloak because it's a large surface, but there are some tinier parts here as well. And I'm going to fix that later on just by using a brush. And of course you can paint the entire cloak with a brush if you want, but this is so much quicker and easier and creates a nice flow. Now on the front he's wearing this mask, which I'm painting in the same color but just by using a brush because there's too tiny of an object for me to use an airbrush on. And this way I can be very precise and just cover exactly what I want. Now when I'm finished, the result is something like this, and I'm already very excited about this miniature. I love that glow, and the green really pops out on this mini. It's really a focus point. Now it's time to highlight those purples. And for that I'm using Cacophony Purple, and I'm also doing it by airbrush first, holding it from top to down so you get a nice glow from the top. And again I'm using my brush for the tinier highlights, some edge highlights on those straps here, the corners, just to emphasize it a bit more, and it can be the brightest at the bottom of this piece of cloth. Also the corners, the edges, as you would normally do a highlight. Now it's time for the straps around his hands and legs, and for that I'm using dried bark as a base color. His legs are entirely wrapped in straps, his arms as well, some around his hand here. And finally, of course, there's his gold armor that he's wearing. We're going to get to that later on. First, we're going to start with all the base colors of these parts that are still left. Now for those hair, those braids of hair, I'm using Warpfiend Grey as a base color and just touching the very round parts and leaving the dark parts black as it was before. There's a tiny bit of gray shining underneath, which I did on purpose, so you get a nice transition in grays. And this Warpfiend Grey is kind of purple, so it really works with the rest of the colors. Now for all the gold parts on his boots and the armor pieces he is wearing, I'm using Thondia Brown as a base color. And we're going to continue by highlighting that gold with Mournfang Brown. I'm covering about 70-80% of the color we painted before, focusing on one side as the side where the light would come from, and I figured that the light is coming from his left side, so not the part where the blade is, but the other side. So the blade is the light source on his right side, and the actual, let's say, sunlight is coming from the other side, which creates a nice glow on the gold. Next highlight color for the gold is Balor Brown, and you can start to see that yellow tones really coming out, and which really works for a non-metallic metal color. I'm also doing that on the armor piece on his shoulders, holding my brush sideways to just pick out those tiny details, and also on the ends of the braids in his hair. There's a lot of them here on top. Just give it an edge highlight and add some shine, so don't completely cover it. Once done, we're covering all the gold parts with Reikland Flesh Shade, and that brings out the yellow a bit more and adds a bit of warmth to the metal. Final highlight is Zamazi Desert, and this I'm using just as a tiny edge highlight and some reflection here and there, just to make that gold and the shine reflection believable. You get a nice warm gold tone this way. The hair I'm picking out with Slanesh Grey, which is a slightly brighter version of the Warpfiend Grey we used before, and still has that tiny purple glow in it, so it really works with the rest of the model. Once that is done, I'm using Baneblade Brown to edge highlight all the straps we painted before. Now we're almost there, there's just some tiny parts to finish up on. And one of those things is the emeralds in the gold armor pieces all over his body. I'm base coating it with Lupercal Green. There's some on his knees, his shoulders, his chest, his back even. And here around the feet as well. Make sure you get top and bottom, as they're not really visible, but they are there. Next I thin down some mood green into a glaze consistency. Nice and thin, but not too thin. And I'm smearing that in, let's say, a U shape to the bottom of the emerald, so you get a nice glow. The darker part is still visible, and the bottom parts I'm making a kind of a tiny U shape, so an opening at the top, and then the top parts I'm turning it around, so the darker part is still visible. that really works with the reflection. Now when glazing you might have to go over it twice and kind of blend those colors together so you have a natural transition. And finally I'm using Phalanx Yellow to add a extreme highlights. So a blend from dark green to yellow is a nice build-up in colors. And also thin down this paint a lot, so you have a tiny part that is bright but not a hard point, because otherwise it's not really a believable reflection. So also glaze this in and just pick out the edge that should be highlighted. Make sure the edge is on the same side on all of them. Now with the same way we approached the emerald, we're painting the eyes, except for the yellow. I wanted the eyes to be green, so I started with a dark undercoat and covering it with some mood green. And now it's time for the weapon. And the weapon I'm painting with Tesseract Glow. The weapon is still transparent, and you have to make sure that you're not completely covering up the transparent part, otherwise what's the point? So I thinned down the Tesseract Glow to about a 50-50 mix of water in my case, and went over it I think 2 times, so you get a nice coverage but not too thick. And now you can see that glow on the cloak really working out. It really looks like it's emitting from this weapon and reflecting on that cloak. Now on the edges I'm darkening it down a little bit, because the pure form of energy is from the original source point, so it kind of darkens down when reaching the end. And for that I'm mixing some striking scorpion green in the Tesseract Glow. Just picking out those very edges on the end here, so leave the beginning alone. Finally, some pure striking scorpion green for the extreme tips, to get a nice flow in greens. So only the very end and maybe some tiny tips on the side. Then it's time to paint the base, and for that I used Thondia Brown, but of course you can use any color you want. I really found that this color worked with the rest of the bright colors we painted before. And here's the final result on Zeratul. What a fantastic miniature for the StarCraft Tabletop Miniature Game. And the game itself is coming out somewhere during this year. It's supposed to launch in April or May, and pre-orders are up from March, I believe. Now I intend to paint a lot of them when they come out, and they will all reach the YouTube channel, so please let me know if you're interested in this kind of content, because I will be making a lot of them if you are. So for now, thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And please check out my Patreon page as well for a lot of different content. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!